Good evening and welcome. My name is Paul Amos, and I'm the founder of The Redeemed. The Redeemed is an organization, online community built for men to come together and allow them to share both their struggles in life and their triumphs of overcoming those struggles. Today, we bring to you another round of our Pursuing Restoration, a webcast that allows us to talk to special members of the community about all forms of brokenness and how we can use the life of Jesus Christ to heal our wounds. Today I have a very special guest, Mr. Richard Illges. Not only is he a financial advisor who can speak to the financial brokenness that we see in this world, but he's also the founder of Man School, a personal Bible study that I attend and something that has given me a great amount of resources and opportunity to really learn the Word of God. And so, Richard, I welcome you today, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm honored.
Well, thank you.
Very much so.
We'll start today, since we're the Redeemed, we'll start today with a question that really I love, and which is, what does redemption mean to you?
Yeah, I think in redemption is, to me, coming to your true self. Our sin nature just tends to lead us into operating out of what we call the false self. And as you walk with Christ and He begins to work through you, I think what He's after ultimately is our heart. And we operate out of so many ways to try to cover our heart up, not let it be exposed, and that false self sort of takes over, and we take on these personas of who we want people to think we are. And redemption, to me, is the process of not operating out of that false, but beginning to learn how to operate out of the true, and that I bring to you who I authentically am. I don't need anything from you. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just bringing my real vulnerability, my real self to you. That authenticity is, to me, is redemption. Now, you don't ever get there completely. It's a process. But the goal is to get as far along that path as you can to where I no longer have to operate out of the poser or the false self that so many of us are operating in.
You know, Richard, I lived a lot of my life in my false self. I mean,
Yes.
I still struggle with that on a daily basis.
We all do.
And I know in our Bible study in Man School, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the false self,
Yeah.
the poser.
Yeah.
And we had an opportunity with Bart Hansen on the show to talk about the poser and a little bit of the things that are happening. But can you tell us a little bit about how the false self leads into some of the financial problems that people have?
Sure, yeah. Go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry.
please. No, it's great.
So, yeah, you know, I see it in my job. I've seen it in my life. I've done it. I've made more financial mistakes probably than I can even remember or count. But to me, it stems out of a wound usually, shaped by a father or brother or just our growing up experience. It may be, how we were, how we operated at school with our friends, and this capitalist society that we're in, where I've got to go out into the world and prove to everybody I've got what it takes. I've got to make a name for myself.
Yeah.
I've got to validate that I am a man. I have what it takes. I can show my dad, you told me I'd never make it. I'm gonna make it. So I think whatever that wound is, I think many of us are operating out of that, and money is just a really easy avenue to go towards to get that validation. So the more successful I am, the more money I make, the more, hot investments I make that turn out to be big successes, I can brag to my friends about them or whatever. Or I can just tell myself subtly and quietly, I do have what it takes, because look at what I've been able to do financially. And money's a lure, it's a bait for that, a very dangerous one. Much like sex is. I'll get my validation that way. I'll get my validation through money. I'm trying to find something to medicate the wound that I've got to make me feel like the man I think I'm supposed to be. And so I just see money as being a tool for that, and it's pretty destructive.
Yeah. For me personally, performance was the thing that I focused on. The better I performed, the more I was rewarded, the more I was able to actually get love and affection. And one of the biggest counters of that is money. Yeah. I mean, the more money you make, the more you performed in this society today.
Yeah, it's the scorecard,
It is the scorecard.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
The Bible probably talks about money more than almost any other item, which is surprising to people when you think about love, when you think about all the messages of Jesus, how many times that He talked about money in the Bible. What do you think that's about, and what do you think is at the heart of Jesus' heavy focus on money?
I think he knew very well that because he's after your heart, and what he wants from you is your heart, Paul. He doesn't want the performance. He wants your heart. That money would be the avenue or the temptation to go down. So, the rich young ruler came to him and he said, sure, go sell all your possessions. And he turned and walked away crying. Well, that's the one thing I don't want to do. He knew that the money was going to be the temptation we'd turn to, one of the biggest temptations we'd turn to, that it would become an idol, that it would become our God. And boy, in America, really, with the capitalist society we're in, which I love capitalism, it's a fabulous thing, but taken out of context, improper balance, we can begin to get, this is my validation. How often do I check my net worth on my phone every day? Or look at my stock portfolio, or measure my investments, or think about money, or think about the next car I want to buy, or the next house I want to buy, or one day I'll have a beach house, or whatever those things we think about, versus how much time am I in relationship with Jesus. So money becomes our God. It becomes the idol. It becomes, this is what will make me feel better about myself. And what Jesus was after is, no, bring that to me. I'm your Father. I want to give you what you need. Don't go to these false idols and go get them. And money is probably the easiest. He probably knew it was the greatest lure we'd have. And so I think that's why he spoke about it so often.
It's funny, when you look in the Bible, there are things like the widow's mite that show money and the receiving and the giving of money as being so powerful.
Yeah.
Can you talk for a minute about tithing and charity? Because I think in one sense we see the evil that money brings.
Yes.
But in another sense, God's asked us very directly how he wants us to give money, and then how he wants us to be generous to people, whether it's the poor or whether it's those in need.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a moment about that?
I'll tell you from my personal experience, giving money away, tithing, has been the best counter to the temptation for the idol of money. And Andy Stanley, who speaks so well about money, has always said, I give first. First, immediately when I get my paycheck, I give. We always give. We've always given first. And he said, I do it to tell my money, you don't own me, I own you. Mm-hmm. Versus, I'm going to pay all my bills, see what we've got to do, see if we've got room to do this. Do we need to go buy something like this? And then at the end of the month, if there's some money there, well, then I can give a little money away. But radically shifting your mindset to, no, I'm going to give first. It's not my money. I'm just the steward of it. The parable of the talents. These three guys, I'm going to give you this, be the stewards of it. I'm going to come back later and check on you. I think that's what God's doing with each one of us. And by giving first and by giving abundantly, we are defeating that idol of money and saying, no, you're a tool, you're not an idol, and I'm going to use this to bless other people, and then I'll live on what's left, which is a radical reversal of the mindset most of us live with, which is I'm going to spend and do everything I want first, and if there's anything left over, I'll put some in the plate on church on Sunday.
That reversal of fortune is one that is extremely powerful and a total different mindset shift.
Yeah.
When I heard Andy Stanley talk about it, much like you have, he holds out $10 and he hands out $1 and he says, this is God's money, and you give it back to him. It's a powerful message.
Yeah.
When I think about the message of Jesus and I think about him coming and talking about the impoverished, when I think him talking about, those beyond just what we're giving in terms of our money to the church, I think about giving back in multiple categories. Money is one of those categories, but giving back in terms of our time and our service are essential elements to that.
Sure.
And so I'm curious how you think about giving back charitably, because I know you're a charitable person. I know you've been involved in great ministries that have been growing, and maybe you can talk for a minute just about what you're doing and some of the development of those things in terms of giving back to those in need.
Sure. I do think you're right. I think it's way beyond just a check you can write. You're a very, very smart guy. You've got a lot of skills and talents that I don't have, and a ministry might need those skills and talents. I'm involved with the ministry here locally. I'm on their board, and they've pulled people together on that board who've got far different skill sets than the founders that are there running it, and they're passionate about what they do on the street in the day-to-day ministry. But I can come and not only support them financially, but I'm a sounding board. I've got other talents that they do not have. And as I look around the room and see the other board members there, you see how God kind of puts this mosaic together of people with all different talents, skills, and abilities. And, she might have a heart for something I don't have a heart for and can speak to that. But I can talk more about the financial side of, are we really thinking about this the right way? And I've seen the founders of this ministry just radiate with that of, gosh, you just don't know how blessed we are to have all this talent around the table helping us accomplish what it is we want to do. And that's not money. That's truly talents and abilities coming to help as well as the money. Is that sort of what you're thinking?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So shifting just a little bit, as you think about the problems that you see in your daily life and your financial, what I honestly see is, okay, there are so many ways the enemy can take away from a man. He can edge at the heart when it comes to everything from sex to addiction to anything that bonds an individual to the loss of the masculine heart. But financial things can be a loss of the masculine heart. I think so often men are seen as the financial head of the household. And when financial decisions have gone awry, they're seen as being totally broken. And so maybe you can just talk for a minute about what you see and how people make mistakes, and then a little bit about what can they begin to do to try and crawl out of that hole.
So I've made them, you've made them, we all make financial mistakes. And you're right, when they go south on us, what immediately comes on us is the shame. And because it was constructed on, if I do this and I get the payoff, then I'm going to get my reward, which is one, the payoff, but two, it's going to validate that wound. It's going to validate the healing of that wound. If I can go make it on this and it works out great, then I'm going to prove to myself I've got what it takes. Well, when it goes south, it's going to have the exact opposite effect, and it's going to crush you. And the shame will come in, the condemnation, you stupid idiot. All those things the enemy whispers to you along the way. Anyway, you take the bait, I'm going to go try to do this thing, I'm going to hit a home run on it, it goes south, and it just is further confirmation. And so I've seen people do it. I see them do it with greed and, taking over-leveraged bets on things, and I'm just trying to make a big hit on it and losing track of the real purpose of the money. I'm trying to get something from it versus it's a tool. And so if somebody takes an outsized bet on an extremely aggressive investment and they're saying I'm looking for a thrill or I'm looking for a big payoff or I'm just kind of bored and I need something to do, and so I'm going to toy around with this sort of stuff. The root of that is I'm needing something. I'm looking for something. I'm looking for a validation. I'm looking for a thrill. And you just mentioned sex and drugs and all the other things. Same thing. I'm looking for a thrill. And we do that with our money, and it can be very destructive because then when it doesn't work or when it's exposed, your wife finds out, well, you did what? You put, why didn't you talk to me about this? And then all that shame comes in and conflict arises. And so to combat it, well, first of all, give. I just absolutely believe you should give. Radically flip the script and just say, okay, from this day forward, I'm going to, like Andy says, I'm going to live on 80% of my money. I'm going to give 10, save 10, and live on 80. I think you don't stop at 10. I mean, the goal is not, if I can just get to 10, and I would advise that. People say, well, I can't start at 10. Fine, to start at 3 or start at 5 or start at 6% of your income, but you get to 10, but don't stop there. That's the abundant life. It's like, God, where do you want me to take? It's all yours anyway. None of us are getting out of here with it alive. I mean, we aren't taking it with us. So why stop at 10? Give more. The more abundantly you give, the more it doesn't have a hold on you. You have a hold on it. You are now an instrument of God's money to invest it in places where it can make a kingdom impact. It's a tremendously freeing tool to combat the lust of the idol, of the faults of what money can do for you. The true of what money can do for you is you can turn around and give it and bless other people and make a significant impact. That's what you'll take into eternity, not the faults of I made a ton of money on Bitcoin or some technology stock. You're not taking that with you into eternity, but you're taking the investments you're making into the kingdom into eternity. So that to me is how I combat it. Is I want to see I want to see how successful I can be to see how much more I can give away.
That's wonderful. You mentioned, you almost came to the term gambling in your answer there when you talked about taking risk.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of earning additional money through investments is about taking some level of risk.
Yeah.
So when you're advising your clients and you're talking about risk, how do you think about what is appropriate versus what's inappropriate?
Right. Well, so the parable of the talents, the three guys, two of them went and invested the money and essentially doubled it. One of them buried it in the backyard because he was so fearful of the master. So those, we don't know what they did, but they invested that money. They no doubt took on a degree of risk to do that. But it wasn't their money. The master hired them to go manage my money. They doubled his money for him, obviously taking on some degree of risk, but it was within a comfortable parameter to win. I'm not going to lose it all, but I think I can make a good return on his money. So it's an appropriate balance versus the other guy who was so fearful he just buried it in the backyard and did nothing with it. So money's got a purpose. We want to try to grow it. We want to try to be responsible stewards of it. He doesn't want us to bury it in the backyard and take no risk, nor does he want us to gamble it all away on, who's going to win the NFL game next Friday night. And it better work out or I'm going to lose all my money. So there's a balance in there. And so my advice to our clients is always, you spread the risk. You don't take outsized bets. You don't chase what's hot because it's thrilling. I mean, that's where you start getting into trouble.
So the market today, not to get too far off
topic,
here we go. It seems to be bolstered by so much movement in the economy and everything else. How do you keep people grounded in the reality of what Jesus is talking about versus the emotion and the expectation of what's happening on TV, on CNBC, the expectation that people see with the massive amount of spending that's happening today? How do you keep them grounded?
Well, the Bible's full of great advice, obviously. And I'm going to quote a guy who I don't think even believes in God, but Warren Buffett always says, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. So that's just a kind of a bedrock of what I believe about investing is, when you see the mania and you see the crowd all rushing one way and the thrill, it appears thrilling, I'm going to be more tempted to pull back and say, now let's think about the downside of that. Versus when everybody's panicked and fearful and afraid, the economy's never going to reopen and the stock market's going to go to zero and all that, that's usually the best time to buy. So I'm not trying to make home runs either way, but I'm saying there's a time to reap and there's a time to sow. And so, at the top, you want to be sowing some of that, reaping some of that harvest, and then when it's panicked and everybody's freaking out, that's the time to sow and make the investments. Yeah. It's just a balance, but I always think about it is there's always a time to sell and there's always a time to buy. Just don't get greedy and don't get fearful. And it's all his money. We're just trying to give him the best return on his money. And the more successful we are, the more we can turn around and invest in the kingdom.
Earlier you mentioned shame.
Yeah.
And I think about the fact that for a lot of our members of our audience, they've made mistakes. Just like you said, you've made mistakes. I know I've made a ton of mistakes.
Yeah.
How do you get people comfortable with getting out of that shame? Because, I think about shame in terms of addiction. I think about shame in terms of, the choices that people make and the fact that there's been so much sin in their lives. Yeah. And it can be paralyzing. That shame and that fear and that cycle that happens is one that can get people to a place where they feel like they can't act.
Yeah.
I think with money, there's a sense of I've lost my money, I've made poor choices, now I don't have the money to spend. I totally get on giving back. But how do you get the courage again and get the focus again to go and build the right things as opposed to going and saying, you know what, I'm going to bury my money. I'm going to be just like Parable of the Talents, and I'm going to live in fear of what happens.
Well, Jesus is after your heart, and he's never going to stop coming after your heart. And it doesn't matter how far down the road you are, how destructive it's been, how much shame there is, there's always tomorrow. And he's always wanting to say, now, all right, you messed up, get up. We're going to walk a different way, but you know, we've got a lot of time left. You're still young, you still got time, or even if you're late in life, there's still time to right the wrong. All I'm asking you, all Jesus is asking you is just do it through me. Trust me through the process. So it's like, yeah, I've messed stuff up and my life's a train wreck, but I believe he wants my heart, and I believe he is coming after my heart, and I'm willing to try one more time, but this time try it through his lens, through his direction, and trust his process rather than the things that got me off track in the first place. I don't ever believe it's too late. I really don't. And I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand with people who've made 180s, done it differently, begun to give and tithe, stick to the process. You know, I'm going to start reinvesting on a regular basis. I'm not going to, if I ever call you and tell you to do X, Y, Z, do not do it. You do what you do. I'm going to trust the process. I've seen people do that, can make complete 180s after having blown themselves up on foolish things, which we all do from time to time.
That's inspiring to hear.
It can happen.
I mean, the reality is, I think for some people, they're frozen.
Yes.
They just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And to hear that people can make that turnaround
Yeah.
by being obedient to God,
Yeah.
by giving back, and by doing the right things, the saving principles, it is inspiring to know that you've seen people
Yeah.
who've made the move in the right direction.
Yeah, and I don't come at money for what it's going to do for me. I think that's the difference. I think in the past life, it was going to give me something back, not financial return. It was going to give me back an emotional return to help fix my wound. I'm no longer going to view it that way. I'm going to view it as it's a tool. I'm not relying on it to validate me as a man. I'm not relying on it to fix anything in me. It's just a tool, no different than a hammer or a screwdriver. It's just got a function, and I'm gonna view it like that. I'm not going to view it as something that can fix all my problems and make me feel better about myself. That's only going to come from Jesus.
Gosh, how many times have I made the mistake of viewing it as a tool?
Yeah.
Of viewing money as something that was going to fix something.
Yeah.
You know, multiple times in my life, I've aspired to earn enough money to buy something.
Sure.
Earn enough money to have this certain item. And what I find is at the end of that journey, it is always one of the least rewarding things that you can ever do.
Yeah.
On the flip side, every dollar that I've given, I find to be some of the most rewarding things that I can do.
Yes.
And I think until you experience that, it's hard to actually hear people and to actually realize that giving back makes a significant difference,
Yeah.
not only in others' lives,
Yeah.
but in your own life.
Yeah. And do you ever find, I'm going to give this money and I don't want anybody to know?
Sure.
Well, so I do too. And it's like, there you go. Now you're really making progress, because now you're saying, okay, I'm not giving this because I want the accolades and I want my name on the side of the building or anything. This is not mine. I'm giving it. Frankly, I wouldn't make this one anonymous. I don't want anybody to even know I'm doing this one. There's a sign of freedom. There's a sign of restoration, because now I'm not even saying, okay, I'm giving this money away. Look how good I am, but I want the accolades. No, I don't even want the accolades. I prefer nobody even know I've done it. That's a sign of progress to me.
The enemy is tempting us with vanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And recognition, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Gosh, that recognition is something that, you know, is so often sought with charities, and
Yep.
that they're constantly putting up different levels of giving, different numbers,
Yeah.
things that aspire to reach a different level. The anonymous is not something that you often see, but what a powerful message it sends when you can be free from actually giving
Yeah.
and having an expectation of something in return.
There you go. That's what we're after.
We've talked a lot about the wound and the heart that a man has, and I think about the wound in my own heart, and I'm sure the wound in yours. Maybe you can just talk for a minute about what it means for someone to overcome that wound and shifting from a life of focus on our earthly situation into one of our heavenly situation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think honestly, I hate to bounce back to the last answer, but I think that's it. I think honestly, it's like coming to that place of it's not going to do something for me. It's not going to make me feel better. It's not going to fix my father wound or my mother wound or my brother wound or whatever. I'm not relying on money for that. Now I'm ready to give it away. I'm ready to invest in the kingdom. I'm ready to impact other people's lives through this thing. And I don't even want any credit for it. I don't even want to be known. That to me is a sign of, that defeats the shame, that's restoration, that's wholeness, that's living out of your true self. That's realizing that I'm not taking it with me anyway. Whatever I've got, He's given to me. He's asked me to be a steward of it. And to Him be the glory for everything that comes from it, because I'm just here to labor in the fields and do what He wants me to do with it. And then when my time's up, I'll move on, you know. But it's the best way to me. Giving anonymously, pouring in. The more successful I am, the bigger the gift's going to be, the more blessings are going to be, is the best way to defeat the dragon of what money can be, which can be just a powerful lure to take you down.
So when I think about all the Bible studies that I've attended at Man School and all of the messages that I've heard you give, I'm kind of blown away at how God must be speaking to you and all the things that He must be telling you about what He wants this message to be. Maybe you can just take a moment and talk about, as your way of giving back, how did the idea of Man School come about? And then how do you stay focused on, you know, what it is that God wants you to preach as a message to your audience?
Yeah, well, I didn't found it, to correct that.
Okay, all right.
Keith Cowart started it at our church 15 years ago or so. I went to a Wild at Heart boot camp in Colorado, and I came back from that and said, I've got to change some stuff in my life. And I got off all boards. I got off any civic thing I was involved with, and I just began to ask God, I want a place. I want a place to serve. I want a place to serve. I don't want any recognition. I got off civic things. I don't want my name. You know, it wasn't about any of that anymore. Now it was about, I want to do what those guys in Colorado are doing. I want to do it here. And shortly thereafter, Keith came to me and said he wanted me to take that over and lead it. So that's how that started. And I've been doing it for 10 or so years. And so, you know, I listen to podcasts all the time. I watch sermons all the time. I read all the time. I'm filling as much of my free time as I can, just trying to get fed and get information and just try to hear God, what it is He wants me to bring to you guys on Wednesday mornings. And, you know, I talk sometimes to my wife about, I don't know how much longer I'm going to do this. I don't know how long and she immediately says, well, no, you can't quit doing it. Because I think she sees the fruit of me digging and being in communication with God and looking for His direction, and, you know, does not want me to lose that.
I had an interesting devotional the other day that talked a lot about the bandwidth that we can give to God.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're giving more and more of your bandwidth on a daily basis. Yeah. I think about the fact that 5 years ago I didn't listen to a Christian song. Today I almost exclusively listen to Christian music. I think about what I try to do in terms of the time I spend in my Bible. And this is not for vanity or for anything. It is for trying to give God the time that He really wants us to receive. It's clear to me that you've done that. What do you do to maintain that, and how do you keep your spirits high and focused on what God wants you to know?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I run a full-time job too. I mean, I run a business all day long, and it's a stressful business, and it's, you know, demanding. And I'm, you know, work 7:30 in the morning. I go home at 6 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. You know, I mean, 52 weeks a year, 50 weeks a year. So I mean, it's a side gig for me, but it's incredibly valuable side gig, and it's my priority. I mean, this is where I get all of my spiritual feeding, is through my preparation for that. But time in the woods, time away, nature, I'm big into just time. I walk around. You see me walking around our office park a lot of times. The more I can get outside and just ground myself, it's just it's restoration to me. It really is. So I mean, that's a big part of it, trying to keep that balance. A lot of times I'll go at night and just sit on my driveway in a chair, have my dog out there, and we just sit and watch the sunset. I'm just trying to connect with the Father any way I can.
Well, you mentioned restoration, and we're very fortunate that next month we're going to have a fabulous opportunity to talk with Bart Scarborough about restoration and the ministry that he's built. I want to take a moment and just thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming today. I appreciate you sharing this important message and an opportunity for our audience to hear about not only what they can do to learn about doing things the right way, but how they can recover from financial loss.
My honor. Thank you.
Well, I just want to take a moment and thank each and every one of you from our audience. It's spectacular to be here with you on a monthly basis. We're very excited, as I said, that next month Bart Scarborough will come and talk about restoration and a little bit about the ministry that he's doing. And I think it's going to really enlighten you and fill you up. We at The Redeemed are very thankful to have you, and I hope that you will follow us on social media. I hope that you will continue to look at our website and see the things that we're doing, and we continue to hope to give back to you. Thank you very much and have a wonderful